So we are back, and we are going to talk about what is happening. And I have a very special question for our guest. It is basically tailored for her, and it is about what is happening, climate change and the African woman. You have worked closely with women on the ground since you represent your community, as you said in the conferences. How is climate change reinforcing gender inequality in East Africa, and how do you see climate justice, that is the financing, the policy making, more placed and protecting women's livelihoods and leadership? I ask this because we did talk about how climate affects everybody, and when we have climate-induced conflicts, as men pick up guns to gun fight, women have to look for food. We have very bad statistics in Congo when it comes to rape, in Somaliland, basically in all those regions that have been affected by climate change, and we're having refugees, climate refugees. That is why I'm asking that question.
That's actually a very good question, and I like that you stuffed it with a lot of flavor. One thing I think I want the viewers to know is women in East Africa are like primarily the food producers. They are the water fetchers, they're the caregivers, they are like basically when you talk about the backbone or the foundation of a society, you'll find a woman there. Yes. And yet when it comes to like the climate crisis and resource distribution, they're like the least considered people and the least considered demographic. When we talk about, like for instance, droughts mean longer walks to look for water. Floods mean crops and loss of crops, loss of homes, and even school dropouts for children and young girls. Climate change is reversing like decades of so much that we have worked towards the empowering women, towards gender justice, towards where the gender fight has come from, especially when it comes to aligning women and empowering them and bring about gender equality and making sure that women have the same opportunities, because by default, if there's a drought, it's the young girls are going to drop out. It's by default that the young girls are going to be married off. To continue, like in many communities that we have worked with, women have the solutions, like in agroecology. They have the solutions in adaptation. They also have the solutions, but the problem is they're excluded in decision making. Like even when we look at the delegation we take as a country to these rooms where these things are being discussed, you find there are fewer women. There are fewer women negotiators. There are fewer women that have the opportunities, that even receive the financing to get to these rooms and talk about their experiences or even represent their communities. So it's how should I explain it? It's sad that because women are under opportunized or given opportunities, it becomes very hard for them to even access funding for gender responsive for young girls and young women, but also for when there's a crisis like floods and all these things. And also when it comes to policies being made, we have seen rooms where policies are made and women are not there, and you'll find like two women that are representing very, very few communities. And so, and being a woman is really, it goes back to tailor-made solutions. Being a woman is tailored to where you come from, which culture are you relying on, who are your people. And but also when it comes to leadership, women are doing a really, really, really great job at fighting for climate justice, at fighting for climate action. But also, if you ask me what climate justice means, for me, climate justice means gender responsive financing. That when we bring finances, there's supposed to be money for these women in communities. There's supposed to be money for grassroots actors. And of course, with the risk of marketing what we do in our organization, when we have such opportunities, we deal with 70% women and 30% men, because I also am a huge believer of at least we need to hold the hands of the men as well as we move forward. Then those men can probably spread the information to the rest of the men. And so women's voices must shape national adaptation plans, because again, if we cannot adapt to the changing climate, then our future is one of doom and one of destruction, because we have seen how communities and economies have grown and stuff like that. And yeah, we don't just need to include women, we must center them as architects of resilience,
So,
if you ask me.
Still on that, as we move on, yesterday we had BRICS 17 in Brazil, and climate was part of the final declaration. The family fought, I think, had 3 women. BRICS is made up of about 10 members, and then 10 partner states. So the women were the president of World Bank, the president of the New Development Bank, who is the former president of Brazil, and our first lady. And the climate was in there, very, very central. Brazil is also going to host COP30. If we go back, there is always that money put aside to fund women-led projects. How does an East African access that funding? If you look at the G7 declaration, the G20 declaration from last year, there is money put aside for women-led projects, especially in climate. But how is that money accessed by a normal woman here in Kampala?
With fear of looking like I am not informed, I don't know so much information on that.
Yeah.
But I would want to guess that accessing that money is the same struggle that women everywhere go through. Like if I wanted to access a loan in this bank, I'm a businesswoman and I've tried accessing a loan here as a woman, and it's not easy because first of all, historically we didn't own land, and right now that you want to go and borrow money to probably put in your business, it's harder because men are the ones who have inherited the land and all that stuff.
Yes,
and it becomes hard to
I just wanted to bounce back on what you were also saying earlier. About this idea that climate change is a particular threat for women and women in East Africa, in our concern. I don't know, would it be possible to argue that the main threat on women in here and all around the world is patriarchy? Would you agree with me on that?
the main trait.
Patriarchy kills more women.
Threat.
Patriarchy kills more women than climate right now. Can we agree on that? Let me just maybe continue my point, and then you. So if patriarchy, so patriarchy is also a problem, right? So in order to reinforce their power, men also tend to discipline women. Do you see like climate change and the all sort of tools that it develops as interesting tool against patriarchy and liberation of women, further the question of climate, also like a larger liberation?
How do I say? Well, patriarchy is the enemy of even men when we talk about it in general, because when we have seen that men are cocooned in one angle of, no, I am a man, and which is actually ends up being a prison for them. But if you ask me in context of climate crisis, every time there is a climate crisis, first of all, by default, women are naturals. By default, we want to see that everyone is fed, everyone is safe, you get. So when there's a climate crisis, like a landslide, like floods, by default, I'm going to be like,
the women are the first line.
Thank you very much. We are the first line. First of all, we are the first line of 14% more destroyed. Like we die 14 times more than men die during crises. We lose, like we suffer more. Our children, because you can't run because you have children. You can't run because, so there's so many things that happen when it comes to women. But the problem is, even the civilization we have gotten, there's a certain point we had gotten to, and domestic violence is a global wrong. Like we all know domestic violence is a no. But communities that are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis, because you're trying to survive more than you're trying to actually make sure you're safe. You find yourself being subjugated to domestic violence. You find yourself that you're sending your children to early child marriages because, I mean, you need to find food. When we had the crisis in Karamoja, we had young girls that were married off because this man that got them, the girls, had food and had cattle and could feed the family where the girls came from. So you become a commodity, a barter trade of sorts. For your family to get fed, you actually have to drop out of school because if you have to walk from Jinja to probably Kampala to get water, that means you have used probably 4 hours of your day, and people in school are already studying. School does not wait for a child that has gone, that has not studied. And the same thing happens with food and all these things. And it's really, really sad that that is what the world is.
So that crisis disempower women.
Yes.
Like it impacts women more and it disempowers them.
It disempowers women, it affects women more, but also it makes men very violent.
That's what I was about to say. Does it also empower men, therefore?
It makes men
does a cyclone empower toxic masculinity?
Yeah, toxic
Yes,
masculinity.
it makes men
props
very
up,
violent.
yeah.
Yeah.
It makes men very violent and very entitled and
Do we have concrete
It's really
example
sad.
in East Africa of that?
We
where
have.
we have them. There's communities we have worked with, and someone tells you we were okay when we're tilling the garden, and we were okay when there was food coming out. Once we got broke, the man became bitter. The family was even very okay. He stood and left us alone. He has never come back. He just disappeared and left her with the children, as many as they are, which is a very, very sad thing, actually, if you ask me. Yes.
And as you said, patriarchy applies to both women and men.
Yes.
And in that case, both are victims of it.
In,
Yes.
in the current conflict in Sudan, they say women travel further distances to look for water that is used in the homesteads, and as the girls are going to look for water, in between the journeys, that is where the assaults happen.
Yeah, and rape.
And
Yeah.
yet
And the
petrol is flowing.
Thank you very
Just
much.
saying.
Thank you very
Just
much.
saying. Petrol is flowing out
Yeah.
of South Sudan,
Yes.
but people have to walk to get their
Yeah.
water.
And the same
2025.
thing happens in the Horn of Africa, where there is
Yes.
a huge drought, where we see animals, both wild and domestic, dying off. Like, people are just dying off, and women are left for dead. They are either raped when they're trying to
So
find
bloody long.
solutions, which is really sad.
But it's actually a perfect transitions for our new set of questions, which is really like, what will happen of that climate change? Already in 2022, East Africa temperature was 1 degree 76 million of degree. I don't know how to say that in English. So more than 1.76 degree since 1900, right? Since the beginning of industrializations in the global north. So it is already happening, and I think we would all agree here to say that the 2% we're not going to stay under 2% of industrial levels. So what do you see is likely to happen to the region? Where do you see the region in 2050? Do you see a region that is more divided because of that climate change, like men and women more divided maybe? Do you see a regions where we have cut ourselves from the rest of the world because our resources are enough? How does East Africa like interact and exist in 2050 with, let's say, 2 or 3 degrees more?
So before you come in on that, of course, this is a region that is growing. And there are some things we may need to forego if we are to keep, if we are to safeguard our environment. We are at a crossroads in development. First of all, we are the fastest growing region in Africa. We need to industrialize, to create jobs, to have to produce what we need in the region. So I really want to know where are we going? How would this crisis look? Can it be managed, or we don't have hope?
Well, a friend of mine said it's too late to be pessimistic. So we have hope. But
Just because a friend of yours said it.
no, not because a friend of mine said it. Because they articulated the words the way I wanted them to be articulated. But it's either we fight or we let us die one by one, or community by community, because the climate doesn't take one by one. It takes like a massive, oh my goodness, and landslides come, people die in bundles, and it's really sad. But it's either we work towards climate action and actual climate action, not greenwashed climate action, or we stay at business as usual. But that will be over my dead body and a few of my friends who are fighting for climate justice. You get? So we just need societies and communities and the general public to join us in this fight and hold ourselves accountable. You may not be we may not talk about the actual financing, the big money we need to talk about at the global level. But let's talk about at an individual scale. We talked about consumption reduction. If you cannot, probably, if you're addicted to buying phones, reduce on how much plastic you consume, because that's just another biodiversity killer. If you reduce on the clothes, oh my goodness. We work with a graduate actor who does upcycling of old fabrics, and oh my goodness, there's so much cloth waste, fabric waste. You know, reduce on how many clothes you buy. You don't need to have clothes for every event. If you actually need to be at every event and show up in a different way, start hiring clothes instead of buying them to own them.
But this is a 20th century problem. It's like literally just, sorry to put it like this, but just to create that show, we have used maybe 5 or 10 times ChatGPT. We have exchanged to each other like 25 messages, and we have those laptops that are connected to a strong infrastructure that bring information to us. Just to do that is much more energy consumed, especially ChatGPT, by the way, much more energy consumed than to make this T-shirt or another T-shirt of another colors. So yes, we do have solutions for the industry that we create, but we also make really desirable new industries, such as AI, such as laptops or social media. And all of this add to our balance. It's add to our balance. ChatGPT consume, I don't know how much time, but 10 or 15 times more than Google.
Yeah. One question, if you put a basic question, it could consume like a swimming pool of water because the machines have to stay cool.
And there's those,
So they consume a lot of water and it has to be fresh.
So in one end, we say activists are telling us that if we reduce our water consumption or electricity, there's a lot of great solutions. But at the same time, there is people receiving billions of dollars. Elon Musk, I'm looking at you, in order to create technologies that are not sustainable, because the market continues to work and function exactly as it has always functioned, which is whatever makes money, win. Whatever you cut a tree, whatever you plunge a deep mine, whatever you create a laptop, we don't care. You can even they can even create like porn platforms now that if it makes money, it's okay. We don't watch at why it makes money. So we, at the same time that we're looking at solutions of 20th century, we also are avoiding like looking at the fact that there is all entrepreneurs and innovation that every day create instruments that consume more energy that we don't have.
That's why it's my job, it's your job, it's his job, us who have the platform and the voices to articulate these voices and articulate what you just said, to actually hold corporations and billionaires accountable, and also tax billionaires, because that's something we're also pushing in for, like that developed nations tax their rich people, because as we stand today...
Tax corporations.
No, tax corporations, tax individual billionaires.
Individuals, not corporations.
Because as we stand today, you'll find that I pay more taxes than Elon Musk does. You understand? I pay more taxes than a billionaire does, but they have more money, they have the money. And this is why even when we discuss these things, some of this money to deal with the climate crisis needs to come from the rich. It needs to come from the private sector. We need to also see how the private sector is held accountable. Because so many times, because the UN system is dealing with governments and not privatized money, there's so many times we are hit with that thing of, well, we don't have money. But the truth is, private people have money. Let's tax them. Let's stop giving them tax holidays. Let's hold them accountable. But again, it's my job, it's your job, it's every young person's job.
But over the last 30 years, those rich people have got extremely richer. When I say extremely richer, it's disgusting.
30 years
I get you.
far.
No, 30 years is exactly the time that we start putting more carbon in the atmosphere.
Yeah. Okay.
So they got rich and extremely rich outside of destroying the planet, and now we are coming to ask them, please, can you give us a bit of $1 million? Because now we are confused. We need to plant a tree in Ethiopia. It is not going to happen. The rich are not giving us their money that they make outside of destroying the planet.
That is why we're advocating for laws to be there, to be in laws, government laws.
But they have more money for the advocate that we have. With us together, we don't have enough money for our advocates.
Well, I get that, I know, but again, there's ways. Trust me, there's ways.
Against the rich, the only way is to take their money without asking them. As soon as we ask them to act, they want.
But the only way you take their money is not by buying from them.
Yeah.
But consuming, they will still make it desirable.
I know people who left X.
Yeah, great,
And
but they still have a laptop.
No, this is
And ChatGPT.
including myself. Like
Including
I
me
don't.
too.
You get. This is my point.
haven't tweeted in
This is
a
my
long
point.
time.
We start with one by one.
Yes.
Let me tell you. I know it's radical. This is the thing. I know we want it to happen right now, but there is no
Yanis
way
Varoufakis
it's going to
says
happen. Sorry.
Yanis Varoufakis says that if all of us just abandoned X for one day, all of us,
By the way.
one day,
You get.
We abandoning X at the moment where ChatGPT 2.5 is created, and ChatGPT 2.5 use like 3 times more energy
But
than
still,
X at the last innovation.
Thomas, with activism, we can't say today we are not doing X. They will be impacted. Tomorrow we say we are not doing any chatbot.
But all the time there's something that consumes more energy that come out. That's what I'm trying to say.
True.
If we ask rich people, what they tell us is to say that the technology that we produce with the very same petrol that is blocking our climate is going to be used. And they will continue to use the current system that have enriched them, which is capitalism and its phase of neoliberalism, to destroy the planet.
On where we are going, of course, we want the region to develop. We want jobs. We want better livelihoods. What should we do with our resources? In Europe, in the Scandinavian countries, the socialist democrats, they have given up on mining their oil.
I mean, there's less people in Norway than in Kampala.
No, but they can mine their oil and sell it.
But they
But
sell
what
it.
they have done,
But they still sell
They
it.
still sell it,
But
it's
you
in
see,
the atmosphere.
when we talk about like divesting and stopping
yes,
production of
they
fossil
have
fuels,
closed
dependence,
some
and all
wells
these things.
off and
Closing some wells is not enough, especially for developed countries. Closing some wells is not enough.
And also they're still making extremely
and
huge
this is the
amount of
thing.
money from it.
And this is the thing, buying and selling, that is what we need to talk about. Because developed nations need to have, actually that's something we're talking about come COP30, that by the time we leave COP30, hopefully, because we were played in Belém and we didn't get just transition money, but I'm hopeful that when we get to Belém, we're played in Baku, when we get to Belém, that there is a date when developed nations stop production, selling, and buying of these fossil fuels that have led to the destruction of the planet. Because until then, there is no other nation that is going to join on the bandwagon of just transition. And then we're going to keep washing while we hang in the soil and doing the same thing over again. Why am I saying that? All these discussions we're having start from us reducing on the CO2 and greenhouse gases. That means whoever keeps cattle in a dangerous way and produces a lot of methane, we are looking at you. Whoever produces fossil fuels and you produce a lot of CO2, we are looking at you. Like, we are having our eyes on you and the public is looking at you. Now, for this to happen, for countries like Uganda to say, okay, we're done with the eco pipeline, countries like Germany, countries like the US, the UK, have to stop production of fossil fuels. But again, if we're still fighting with such things, with countries that can adapt to the changing climate crisis, with countries that have already built systems to survive without these fossil fuels, then we're going to tell regions like East Africa to stop production of fossil fuels. You understand? What are we going to tell? Because yes, that, and I've told this to so many people. Every time I sit in a bilateral with someone from the global north, I tell them the same thing. It becomes a sabotaging game when you tell Africa and the global south to stop investing in fossil fuels or to stop building fossil fuel
I think we're doing well already.
projects.
For example, when it comes to electricity.
Well, we're not doing very well.
Most
We're
of
not doing
electricity
well.
comes from
You see,
renewables.
it comes back to the fact that as I speak this, I want to contradict myself and say, for me, it's useless for us to have the eco pipeline if it's not benefiting us. The reason we should have these pipelines is to benefit the region and the countries and the communities. But if they're not benefiting us, let's shut them down.
It will benefit the class, exactly like coal have
Because
benefited
it's
the
going to be the
particular
same
class
thing.
of imperialists.
Thank you
Coal
very
have
much.
made
It's going to be the
imperialists.
same thing. When we're going to produce fossil fuels, taxes, we're going to make, like I said, 100 euros, and then 68 of those euros is going to be flown to France. And then 8 of those euros is going to be flown to China. And then we have nothing. And then we're scrambling and petitioning for the 15%. But we have gone to the whole branch. Our communities, our water bodies have been encroached. National parks have been encroached. And keep in mind, our biodiversity, where the pipeline is right now, is the most fertile part of the country.
Of course.
You get? So there's less production of food happening. We have seen what has happened in regions like the Niger Delta, regions in Colombia, in all these places that have had fossil fuel production. We have seen the injustices that have happened in those places. You understand? So my point is, even as I say my first statement of we need developed nations to have a divesting day of when they stop investing in fossil fuels, we also need our countries to stand on business and stop inviting these imperialists and stop inviting these rich corporations into our backyards to harvest our minerals, to harvest our resources.
That is a very good way to go. But for example, if this is an assumption, if ECOP was fully owned by East Africa, do we have the money to develop it? That is why we end up inviting the other guys because of capital flows. We don't even tax the capital. It just comes in, put what they want on the ground, and then they take all the profits.
You see, my point is...
So what do we do in that case? Because that is going to take us to climate financing. Sometimes when we ask if we woke up and the billionaires and the corporations paid what they're supposed to pay, there would be conditions.
I've also talked about that, but I remember in Sharm el-Sheikh, I had a bilateral with the energy minister of France.
Yes.
That was COP27, and I talked to her about the eco pipeline and what they can do. And there's so many things that can be done. But you see, the eco pipeline, like I keep saying, is 70% not Ugandan.
Yeah, true.
You get? And because it's 70% not Ugandan, we cannot stop it in Uganda. We have to stop it in France 70%.
And China and Beijing.
And China and Beijing. You get? That's why we need to be in collaboration. We need to be in collaboration.
And as you were saying earlier, like the Uganda project is a small project in the redeployment of all those major companies in the African continent. Because right now they're looking at Namibia,
they're looking at Senegal,
Mozambique, they have Senegal already.
Thank you very much.
They have Guinea, they even DRC have auctions, new ones. So we're more in the process of extension than of reducing. And that's where, for me, I also wanted like to have different perspective on these conversations. I'm playing a bit of a radical. I push the line, but it's because I truly think that one of the narrative of let's work together, hand in hand, and all of this is a narrative that I heard from the 60s about development state and blah 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 blah. I do believe that at some point we have to stage one agenda for the continent, and one of those agenda could be like, okay, listen, we do not export anymore of petrol, of gas, of gold, of copper, and all those minerals physically stay here. We're not saying we don't transform them. We're not telling to the Chinese, no, the Chinese can come build the factories here, or Tesla can come build his factory and transform the things here. But the more those minerals run around and move around the world, the more carbon they produce, and the more problem we're going to have. And they will have the money to mitigate the things, not here.
Maybe I would want her to come in. If, let's say, we refined our gold, our copper here, we are going to use a factory that is going to emit. Then what do we do for ourselves? I was thinking it's better off for us to get the gold out, but with a partnership, we take it to China and they emit that side and they destroy the environment and we keep ours. But
it doesn't work like this.
All we do is we have a better negotiation.
But you see, you're creating more jobs for China than for Ugandan.
No, it now comes back to how our governments negotiate. If I tell the Chinese, the Chinese company.
Which African president, African government have negotiated strong in front of the Chinese?
No one.
Even Kabila, at the time when he was dealing with the Chinese, he couldn't sign a proper deal for DRC. But DRC is the host of 25% of Chinese consumption. So whatever Chinese produce, DRC has made it.
We have seen examples in Europe. Greece has told Chinese companies, please, as you are investing in our ports, we want you to pay some money into our social security. Why don't we tell them that? You have come for our resources.
Kabila have done that for
We
infrastructure.
need some of the money to go, and youth get money every month.
I think
Can we negotiate that?
maybe it's one of the solutions,
Yeah.
but definitely as a way to also wrap up these
Yes.
conversations, it is important that Africa and East Africa, here in the Purpose That Matters, build its own agenda. We believe in the East African perspective that by building our own agenda, we also will dilute all those dominations of money, dominations of the global north. It is important that there is an agenda built for East Africa. As what does East Africa need? We need to export that petrol, good, so we get the money. But what do we do with the money? How do we use the money? Let's put an agenda of, yes, climate change is happening, but in that climate change, there must be an opportunity for us. There must be an opportunity to turn the table as it is, because all the carbon in the atmosphere is the result of a economic domination that has been made and made us minor and junior in the game.
Okay, so Thomas, you are taking us to where we have been coming to, and I would want Hamira to have the last say. We have all referred to Africa needing its sort of solutions bred on the continent. But far too many of our efforts towards sustainability are still controlled by the outside because of the funding. What does true climate sovereignty for East Africa, how would it look like?
As a
Especially,
conclusion.
going into the future.
True climate sovereignty.
Yes, because somebody may ask you, okay, we have said this, Hamira, what is your solution? African, as Kagame says it, African solutions for Africa.
Climate sovereignty.
Yes. How would you?
You talked about financing.
Yes, yes, very key.
With the UN system and everything, the financing is needed. That's a stamped in. We need the financing to come in for adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage.
Yes.
Again, for us to be able to invest in our development. But for me, an ideal world would be that instead of the money we invest in fossil fuels, also, because so many times I've also talked to African politicians and all they have said of, well, these guys, corporations, private sector cares about us more than governments. But then I'm like, if they did care about us, is they would get the money they're sending to us and then would frog jump, like you said, to renewables. Because fossil fuels is a dying market. We want it, like it or not. It's a dying market.
Yeah, very important that's on record.
Let's not fool ourselves. That's why you notice in Africa, it's the older generations that are pushing for fossil fuels because it's quick money. But for younger people, it's a dying market. It's a dying market. And frog jumping into renewables makes a lot of sense. But how do I envision those renewables? We have the factories here.
Okay.
We produce everything, wind, solar, whatever we need to produce from here.
Yeah.
Create the same jobs that were promised by the fossil fuel companies and corporations. Develop, and we keep, because, for instance, I come back to Uganda because I know Uganda very well.
Yes.
For instance, the eco pipeline, you understand? Let's say it's creating jobs like we are promised. But the problem is we're going to have more expatriates working in these projects than actually our locals. But if someone comes, builds a project here, a factory of solar panels, which is not good, but one thing I know is we will copy and multiply that project. If someone comes and says, okay, we're going to build a factory of all types of renewables that we trust, that is not greenwashed, you understand? And then we develop, we create jobs, we keep our sources of income. Because as a country, our biggest sources of revenue is agriculture and tourism. Two sectors that have been encroached and destroyed by just one project, just one fossil fuel project. Where the project is in Western Uganda is the most fertile place in our country, but it has been encroached on. That means we are reducing on food productivity of the country. The project goes through national parks, affecting our biggest tourist attraction, which is chimpanzees. The project also goes through water bodies, which affects the communities that feed around water bodies. The same project is making us multiplying our emissions per annum by a very, very huge margin, which is 34%. We shall be emitting 34 million tons with just one project, making us major producers, but major emitters, but again, very, very unready, adapted communities, and leaving us financially broke. We have seen the history of what projects have done. We have seen of what communities have been affected. Go read about the Niger Delta. Go read about Colombia. Read about all these places that have been affected. Read about India. Read about
whatever, just Angola, like all
Angola
the African
and all these
producers of
places.
petrol are
Again.
highly corrupt government. Just put it there.
and know what we're talking about. We're not against the country developing.
Yes.
We are seeing through the future. And we want to tell you that if you're a young person, please, if you're a young person, over your TikTok, over your where, please and please and please stand for something. Stand for something, because if you do not, we have a generation of older people that only care about themselves right now and don't care about you or your children or your children's children. And for every generation that has come, the goal has been to protect the next generation. Well, granted that the older ones or the first generation cared about making more wealth for their lineage, we should care about protecting the environment for every child, whether it's your child, whether it's your friend's child, whether it's a child you don't know about. We should protect the environment for all of us and the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, Thomas, no words. So, Hamira has said it all. Thank you very much. That is basically the East African perspective.
Thank you so much for being here. Thanks so much
for having me.
this.